The painting you see on the screen was painted by James Tissot in 1896. It depicts Cain leading Abel to his death. The story of Abel and Cain is a theme frequently explored in the Quran, the Bible, and Sumerian mythology. It is an important anecdote in terms of containing significant turning points for humanity. They recorded their stories as the first born and the first to die, the first killer and the first killed. This story contains thought-provoking details about humanity. Therefore, it is more beneficial to evaluate it within its own nature, rather, than with concepts of right or wrong. Before moving on to the video, I would like to remind you that liking the video and subscribing to my channel is very important to me. Enjoy watching. The Tanakh, which forms the canonical collection of books that constitute the main sacred texts of Judaism and is also called the Hebrew Bible or Old Testament by Christians, describes Abel and Cain as the first two sons of Adam and Eve. The firstborn Cain is a farmer, and his brother Abel is a shepherd. According to the Tanakh, Cain harbored resentment and hatred toward his brother Abel out of jealousy. Eventually, he killed him, committing the first murder in human history. Thereupon, YHVH punished Cain with the torment of hell. The names of Abel and Cain vary depending on the source. For example, in the Tanakh, Cain is referred to as Cain. However, throughout this video, I will refer to them all as Abel and Cain. This is the story of the world's first murder, the first fratricide. The story is narrated in sacred texts as follows. Abel and Cain were the first children of Adam and Eve, the first humans in the world. Cain and Abel were born as twins, each with a sister. God commanded that one of the twins' girls be paired with the other's boy. However, Akhlama, Cain's twin, was more beautiful than Abel's twin. Cain rebelled against this command, wanting to marry his own twin, but Adam deemed this illegitimate. As a solution, Abel and Cain were to offer sacrifices to God, and if accepted, he suggested that the one whose sacrifice was accepted should take Akhlama. Cain and Abel agreed. Abel offered a sheep, Cain offered wheat. God accepted Abel's sacrifice. Thus, Cain eventually killed Abel. Although there are several different versions of this narration of the story, it is fundamentally found in Islamic sources. It consists of interpretations based on the Bible, called Isra'iliyyat. We encounter the story in the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah. The Quran describes the two brothers without naming them as follows. Recite to them the truth of the story of the two sons of Adam. Behold, they each presented a sacrifice to Allah. It was accepted from one, but not from the other, said the latter. Be sure I will slay thee. Surely, said the former, Allah doth accept of the sacrifice of those who are righteous. If thou dost stretch thy hand against me to slay me, it is not for me to stretch my hand against thee to slay thee. For I do fear Allah, the cherisher of the worlds. For me, I intend to let thee draw on thyself my sin as well as thine, for thou wilt be among the companions of the fire, and that is the reward of those who do wrong. The selfish soul of the other led him to the murder of his brother. He murdered him and became himself one of the lost ones. Then Allah sent a raven who scratched the ground to show him how to hide the shame of his brother. Woe is me, said he. Was I not even able to be as this raven and to hide the shame of my brother? Then he became full of regrets. Al-Ma'idah 27:31. In the Old Testament, the consequence of the murder is described as follows. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And Cain said unto the Lord, My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Enoch, and he builded a city, and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. Genesis 4:9-16 Bible. The story of Abel and Cain is one that contains many conflicts and firsts. The first martyr, the first murderer, the first victim, the nomadic settled conflict, the farmer-shepherd conflict. Due to the jealousy that arose between them, the elder brother took the blood of his younger brother. Thus, the first murder in the world was committed. The soil, cursed by the spilling of innocent blood, no longer yielded produce to the farmer. With the effect of exile, the farmer became nomadic and later established a city and transitioned to settled life. In the story, it is told that the two brothers offered sacrifices to God. One was accepted, the other rejected. Thus it is said that the one whose sacrifice was accepted was more valuable in the sight of God and received respect. The one whose sacrifice was rejected is understood to have lost value and reputation. Cain, whose sacrifice was not accepted, succumbed to his jealousy and anger and killed Abel, whose sacrifice was accepted. The parable, no matter the reason, stems from jealousy between brothers. It shows the most dire consequences that violence can bring. Moreover, with this event, occurring in a prophet's family, the message is given strikingly and powerfully that violence toward any person in general, and especially toward siblings, can never be a solution. As told in the story, after killing his brother, Cain is filled with disappointment, feelings of deprivation, and the unease of not achieving his goal. He is devastated, has not attained his desire, and has become one of the losers in this world and the hereafter. In the parable, Cain represents the type of human and brother dominated by evil, while Abel represents the type dominated by goodness. The story of Abel and Cain, in its mythological dimension, is the first murder in human existence. Religious discourse holds that every crime committed by humanity in later times pays a share to the sin of the first murderer, Cain. According to myths and religious texts, after this murder, those exiled and leaving their homeland carry the mark of this great crime on their foreheads and establish a city called Enoch in the Nod region east of Eden. Enoch, or Hanok, is also the name of his son who will continue what he built. This city, or urbanization, will be a new step for human civilization on earth. You know, when Cain responded to God, who asked him about his brother after Abel's murder, "Am I my brother's keeper?" The rebellious and arrogant tone of the answer, as well as probably the meaning of the message, is relevant. First of all, one might consider how familiar and close this expression from a sacred story thousands of years ago sounds to our ears, despite all its antiquity and dramatic context. It is not unusual for us to hear this word from an older sister or brother who was scolded when asked or investigated about their sibling. Although these words are in the form of a question, they also contain an observation. You made me my brother's keeper. The person who protects his brother from dangers, from getting lost, from something happening to him. This is a rebellion or objection against his duty. The struggle to be the eldest son is described as a two-way struggle. The eldest son poses a threat as an Oedipal rival to the father. There is always a difficulty in the father's relationship with him. The father sees in the eldest son's personality the one who will possess everything he has after his death. On the other hand, the eldest son, that is, the older brother, sometimes takes the father's place for the younger sibling or siblings, becoming the target of Oedipal-like hatred, competition, and attack. Displacement. Acting this out is easier than against the father. According to the Bible, God placed a mark on Cain's forehead after the murder. He places it and protects him with this sign. Genesis 4:9-16 Bible. What would be the meaning of protecting a person cursed for his crime from all revenge? In fact, here there is a punishment rather than protection. Killing Cain would not be a punishment for him but a salvation. As long as Cain lives, he will feel remorse and carry the stain of what he did throughout his life. In fact, this guilt will not be limited to his lifetime. It will spread to his descendants. Although the family is the safest environment for each member, sometimes violence and abuse come from family members themselves. Violence causes disruption in family relationships, just as in all other relationships between people. Sibling violence, a type of domestic violence, can sometimes lead to the disintegration of the family, the death of one of the siblings, or long-term disappearance with serious consequences. In the Quran, this violent incident resulting in one brother killing another, and the story of Prophet Joseph and his brothers, which describes sibling violence causing long-term temporary losses, are narrated. In both stories, the causes of sibling violence and the role of the victimized brother in the development of events are examined. In light of their behaviors, they contain clues for preventing violence. The first condition of sibling violence is the abuse of power by the stronger sibling. In fact, this is a common feature of all domestic violence, such as sibling and spousal violence. Jealousy felt by almost everyone between spouses can make life unbearable. Jealousy, which leads to divorces, conflicts between siblings and friends, stemming from one person's superiority or a loved one's attention to another, is an emotion felt by a person and an attitude adopted. Research emphasizes that people experience three types of jealousy. These are romantic jealousy experienced by spouses in relationships based on emotional closeness, sharing parental love and care, sibling jealousy and friend jealousy at school, work, or in the environment. The Abel-Cain story shows that humanity has experienced this emotion from the very beginning. The symbolic meaning of the deadly struggle between Abel and Cain is in the Old Testament. It is also seen as a reflection of the conflict between shepherd and farmer communities. The symbolic meaning of this narrative, having a history extending from the farmer Canaanites to Israel's shepherd nomadic sons, it is thought to be a precaution against contamination and invasion. The Abel and Cain narrative is about the settled ones and nomadic life within the social structure. It is a reflection of the conflict between perpetrators. The conflict Abel experienced with Cain also affected the settled lives of farmers and city dwellers. It is the value of the simple and pure life of resisting nomads. In another interpretation, Abel represents the shepherd, Cain, the settled blacksmith. In this metaphor, although the blacksmith is sometimes feared and sometimes respected, there is a conflict between the two sides. In sacred books, the first rebellion against God is committed in paradise. The creation myth in the Old Testament is repeated in Christianity and Islam. Adam and Eve, as sinners, are condemned to work for breaking God's prohibition and are cast down to earth. After being expelled from paradise, the first crime on earth is the fratricide committed by the first son, Cain, killing the second son, Abel. Thus, humanity committed the first sin in paradise and the second sin on earth. The Abel and Cain theme, cultivated land and the farmer who works that land. It also reflects the ancient struggle between nomad and shepherd. In Sumerian poems, the god Enki, who brings cultural elements to humans, and the god Enlil. Working with them, they send the brother gods Lahar and Ashnan to earth. The gods provide sheep pens to the shepherd Lahar and plow and harness to the farmer Ashnan. Although the relationship between these two gods is good at first, a disagreement begins later. Another expression of this narrative is seen in the story of Dumuzi and Enkidu. In Sumerian and Akkadian myths, where the agricultural economy determines all life, it is told that the shepherd Dumuzi has to compete with the farmer Enkidu to be chosen as husband by the goddess Ishtar. As a result, the story of Abel and Cain describes communities that plow their fields, settle on their lands, live a settled life, make a living through agricultural activities in the past, and half live in neighboring regions, constantly intervening in these lands and causing unrest. At the same time, it represents the never-ending struggle and fight between nomadic shepherd communities. When brother committed the first murder against brother, he ignited a struggle that continues ceaselessly. Armies against armies, nations against nations, humans against creation. I am OWL of Ages. See you in the next video. Take care. Goodbye.